Welcome, friends, to this special episode of Fearless with Shawna Clingerman. Before we get started, before we go even a second further, I want to make sure that you know that this is a two-part episode. So earlier this week, I released an episode with the first part of this conversation. After recording, it was just too long to put all in one chunk. So I wanted to split it for you. And I want to encourage you, if you have not heard part one of this episode in your podcast app or on YouTube or on my website, go ahead and head back to the previous episode so that you can get all caught up and know what we're talking about in this special episode that is about specifically mental health and is kind of just a raw, honest witness of how it feels here in some of the harder places for me as somebody that struggles with my mental health and specifically with bipolar. So, welcome. Now that you know that, to Fearless with me, Shawna Clingerman. I'm your host, Shawna Clingerman, and I am a full time artist and creative mentor. Simply put, friends, I believe in living and loving and creating without fear. Together here at Fearless, we will carve out space for ourselves and for our creativity, space to care for our mental health and to be honest about it too. Most importantly, we will carve out space where we can show up exactly as we are right now with our full, messy, creative hearts. No matter where you are on the journey towards your own fearless creative life, there is room for you right here. And I am here practicing what I preach in full transparency as I talk to you about my own mental health in the thick of it and some of the strategies that I use to help me cope when my mental health is experiencing an extreme, in this situation, an extreme peak. So, I want to share now with you just a few of the ways that I cope. Um, I want to give you these like actual tangible coping strategies that aren't perfect and they may not be right for you or for the people that you love, but they might, maybe there's something I can offer here in my years of experience, and in my willingness just to experiment and try and trust myself. Maybe the things that I've learned can just be helpful to you. And maybe it will just kind of help you understand if you witness other people, myself included, practicing some of these things. Uh, so the first thing that I would say is coping strategy number one for me in all of my mental health journey has been just self-awareness. And in the highs and in the lows, that has been the number one most important thing. No, I have to take that back. The number one most important thing is getting help. So I'm going to say that first because that would be silly to not put in here. And I don't want anyone to think I'm telling you to deal with this alone or to self-treat. If you are noticing the kind of mania that I am talking about here, I want you to get actual professional help. And then that person can help you decide what kind of strategies you need to be sure to use, and then add these strategies in if they feel right for you. So the first thing that I want to mention is that self-awareness. um so much of my mental health angst earlier in my life and earlier in my recovery journey, a lot of it was amplified by being unwilling to see it and notice it and take care of it. We have a tendency as humans to want to just push it away. Feelings are scary. The potential of having a mental health disorder is very scary. Like highs are scary, lows are scary, and there's a tendency to want to not see it. And in my years of practicing paying attention, what I have learned is that the more self awareness I can bring to my hard patches, to my highs and my lows, the more I can just notice without any judgment what is happening, the easier it is for me to get past it, to get through it. Because this process, the process of dealing with really hard things, is often just about the getting through. And so noticing is not the same as trying to fix. Noticing is not the same as deciding, like making a call about if something is good or bad. Noticing is simply saying, oh, wow, this is happening. And so I regularly notice, check in, and pay attention. And I write it down in my journal when I notice new things that are important to my own personal way of experiencing the highs. I note it. So I told you earlier on about that feeling of not fitting in my skin, like not being able to be in my body. That is something that I just have to notice so that I can say, okay, I see what's happening here. I'm having that feeling. That is in my brain. I think sometimes noticing sounds scary because we're not exactly sure what that looks like. And so I'll just tell you the exact thing that I do is I'm going to do it right now here for you. I close my eyes. I just pay attention to what I'm feeling, like actual sensations that I'm feeling. And I notice the most notable thing. That would be this intense, urgent, expansive energy. And I say, oh, yeah, there is that feeling. And if it's something I've never felt before or I've never recognized before, then I think, like, I ask myself, what does it feel like actually feel like? It feels like a little bit like there's pressure from the inside pushing outward on my chest. It's not physically in my body, but it is. It just feels like outward like pressure, and it feels like that feeling of like I might fall, like something's coming. So noticing it is just describing it for myself. And then now that it's in my mental log of experiences that I have had, I can um use that to refer to in the future. So next time, I mean, I'm feeling that feeling all the time right now. So when I notice it, this is happening for me about 15 times a day, maybe 500, where I'm like, huh, like I have this startled, like, oh, and so I stop and I take that breath and I notice. It feels like something's trying to get out of me. And I notice it and I say, "Oh, that's that feeling that I have." Like I've already done a deep study on it. I know that feeling. So it's like a recognizable thing that I can just witness and say, "Oh, I see what's happening. That thing is happening again where I feel that way." That's it. I don't judge it as good or bad. I might judge it, I might examine how it's making me feel, but that's not the same as saying this is a bad thing that I need to stop or this is a bad thing that needs to be taken away. Because that that leans more into the urgency that I'm trying to just like be at peace with. If I take the urgency that I'm feeling and then use further urgency to try to solve it, all I'm going to do is exasperate the fact that this feels intense. So, noticing, accepting that that's what it is, and not judging myself for it are that is the coping strategy that um, is essential for me. The second thing is my tracking strategy. I downloaded this app called Dailyo. I will include a link to it for you. And when when things start to feel a little off kilter, I start tracking my mood every day again. I used to do it every day, but I don't do it every day anymore. It's not necessary for me because I noticed that I was always tracking that same bliss, 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 bliss. So instead, I kind of just let that be my norm. And then when I start feeling myself peak, I go back to the app and I will track for a while now until it feels like I'm in a new stage of stable. Um, Tracking is so helpful. And also tracking reintroduces me to my one ally in this mental health struggle that is always there, always, 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 and that is time. I've learned to recognize time as a tool in coping with mental health struggles. And both sides of the spectrum, time helps me because I know time moves forward. And so if I can say to myself, Shawna, time marches forward. What's going to happen is that time is going to move forward and this will pass. It can allow me to release the need to solve all the things, release the urgency to make it better, release the shame or the fear of what's going to happen. Um, Another thing that I will do, especially on the low end, but if things continue to escalate for me or stay at this really high level um, for a while, actually, I'm doing it right now. I will mark my calendar either with an actual pen or in my brain or put a note like a to do on my calendar that says, usually I pick 2 weeks, but it really depends on the severity of what I'm feeling. But I tell myself, Shawna, we're marking our calendar for 2 weeks from today. If you are still feeling extremely, if you're still feeling like you feel now, if you're feeling worse, or if you have cycled extremely in the other direction, that is the benchmark for when I will call my doctor. I will call my therapist, although I'm going to call my therapist sooner. But if I'm not in therapy currently, or if I'm um, considering that I might need medication, I will make an appointment in 2 weeks to get that help. Now, if this is your first time of having an extreme cycle one way or the other, don't give yourself 2 weeks. These things can escalate extremely fast. And I know that. And so 2 weeks is a safe place for me, unless it's very extreme, then I will shift that date on my calendar. Or if it keeps elevating, I have other signs that I pay attention to. But that mark gives me like a sense of safety that I know I'm going to be okay. And I know that I have resources. It both reminds me that time is moving forward. It reminds me that this does not have to be forever. And it gives me a little of accountability to not let myself settle into a new permanent way of being, because I think all of us that struggle with mental health fluctuations, we can, as soon as we start to have an episode that kicks in, we can tell ourselves that we're gonna this is my new life. This is going to be here forever. It's not going to get better. Those are the fears that can bubble up. And so that benchmark on my calendar gives me a sense of safety that that's never going to happen. And it helps. Um, the other thing that I do that's kind of tracking related is just like keeping tally of my warning signs. And uh, that is knowing both what the warning signs might be in the future. Like maybe just understanding what really bad mania looks like, doing that research so that I can watch for certain things, but also knowing my warning signs so that I can recognize when this shift is happening and um, not have it happening to me without me having any awareness. And so I like to know what my warning signs are so that I can proactively keep an eye on myself, because that's my job as somebody that is living with mental health struggles. That is part of my job as a human, is to know my warning signs. And so I will track those too. Quite honestly, the coming out of your skin is a warning sign for me, which is what kind of has me paying such close attention right now. Another warning sign that would be like it's pushing me further is if I have any visual or auditory disturbances, they call them. And what that means is hearing and seeing things. I haven't experienced that um, to my knowledge in a very, very manic stage, but I have definitely experienced that in a very severely depressed stage. And so I am just keeping track of my track of reality. And even to the extreme of like, if I think something is happening, like the other day, I felt like everyone was driving really, really, really slow. And although everybody probably was just driving slow and it was annoying, that's also kind of a sign for me that, like, am I witnessing things the way that they are, or am I getting caught up in my mania? And because knowing that, I don't want to know that so that I can label myself as crazy or disregard my experience. Not at all. My experience is my experience, whether it's like what other people are feeling or not. But instead, so that I can keep tabs on how my judgment is working, right? Because one of the signs of really extreme mania is making impulsive decisions, or even like acting out in ways that are really damaging to yourself or the people that you love. And if I don't have a good read on what's really happening, it could cause me to make decisions that I would later regret, or that would get me in like dangerous situations. And although I'm not doing that, I am definitely keeping an eye out for that because that's my job right now. Okay, the next one is really, really important because um, I just believe wholeheartedly in this. Part of caring for yourself in the midst of any struggle, but in those mental health struggles for sure, is to be paying attention to my needs. So honoring what I need and looking at everything through the filter of what is going to soothe me, what is going to care for me, what is going to make me feel a little bit safer, a little bit more comfortable, a little bit more protected, even though I'm I feel like I'm exploding out of my skin. And so I pay attention to my body, my mind, my heart, and I give myself everything that I possibly can. And even if that means that, like, I drive to Mod Pizza at 3 p.m. because I suddenly realized I'm hungry, or um, or order DoorDash if I don't feel safe driving. Um, or it could mean that I let myself take a day off work, that I take a nap, that I put aside my other to-dos and record a podcast about how I'm feeling because I can't seem to do anything else anyways. I want to honor my needs right now, not ignore them, because ignoring my needs is only going to further inflate this problem that I'm having. If my weary, urgent, like stressed out body is um needs to eat and I ignore it because I think I've had too much to eat already today, or um I don't really want to spend any money on myself, whatever it is. If I choose to muffle those things, um what will happen is that my body will get more urgent, more stressed out, more in need of soothing. It won't go away. It will just intensify that intensity. Um, and the other element this I think is really important to mention here that I don't think we really think about that often is that so often I think when we are struggling, that inner judgmental part of ourselves that's angry that we're struggling, that thinks that we should be better, that you know, that exists to try to keep us in line, that part of ourselves um might actually like sneakily get a little bit punishing. So I think sometimes if I'm not actively trying to honor my needs, that piece of me that's really frustrated about what's happening will deny my needs because I'm mad at my body. And recognizing that was a huge part of recovery for me because I recognized how often I was doing that in my life where I was like disappointed in myself or I felt like my body was failing me. And so I punished it by not giving it what it needed, by not respecting what was happening for me. I would I would like put myself in the corner, like figuratively. And so honoring our needs is part of how we help ourselves get well. And it's especially important when our mental health is flaring, when because our needs might be harder to find during those times, they'd be harder to recognize, but also our needs are more poignant because we are trying to survive. I'm trying to survive when things get extreme. And that means that my needs are extra important. The final thing that um, I really think helps me to cope, and this has been a work in progress, and it will be maybe my life's work on a personal level. Um, but it's just trying to see if there are ways I can lean into my strengths when it comes to any 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 stage on my extremes. So when I am manic, leaning into my strengths looks like letting myself like soak in the goodness that seems really amplified to me. It's harder when the mania is really turned on because so everything feels so intense, but I can still feel it and I can still appreciate it. And it's a gift, like being able to see things in Technicolor is a gift. And so I do try to make some extra space in my life for that. Um, I like to journal. I like to list things out, collect things. If I can make art, I do that because that is a really helpful way to kind of process out my emotions. Uh, and I try to use the times that I'm like out of sync with what feels like should be normal to do the things that might feel more out of sync. Like recording this episode. Uh like what is actually something that the way that I'm feeling right now can serve versus fight against. So like brainstorming, idea collecting, things like that. This is a good time for that. Um, Creating content like writing things, sharing things out loud. All of that can be easier when my mood is elevated, or harder when my mood is so elevated that I can't think straight. But even in those moments, I do try to think like what right now feels like the best thing to do with this excess of energy. Um, and I try to take advantage of that with the disclaimer that I don't want to set myself up with a bunch of projects that are going to be really depressing when I crash. And so when I say lean into that strength and use that energy, I try to think of really in the moment things, um, or planning that's open ended and not, you know, not like bring on a big job for myself that I'm going to have to sustain for a long period of time because this is not sustainable. Um, so leaning into my strengths is also part of how I can make peace with the highs and the lows, right? Because if I can see the way that bring brings me good things, or the way that they are sometimes of service to me, it makes it easier to be at peace with this really weird stage. I say that with a grain of salt, though, because the truth is that in those extreme extremes, when I'm at a 10 or a 9 or a 1 or even a 2, there's an unpredictability about what it's going to be like, and there is also um, a, a hunker down and stay safe mode that I have to be in, which means I don't have I being productive is not important anymore. Being okay is important. Um, and so using this intense energy in positive ways doesn't have to mean like that I'm creating or doing work. Sometimes, honestly, it means that I stand up and I pace my house, or I do a bunch of air punches, or I mean, I'm like constantly like just moving around, because right now that is a positive thing that I can do with this excess energy is I can try to like process it out of my actual body. And so um I am regularly just moving around, and I'm looking at that as a positive because movement is good. You guys, finally, and I think this is really also my final coping strategy that I want to share. Um, and it's just to me one of the most important things that I have learned. And it is just honesty. Shame grows in the dark. That is just the truth of us, like the truth of it. Shame grows in the dark. So when we keep our unwellness closed away in the darkness, it allows it to fester. It gets infected. It like expands and turns into something bigger and so much more detrimental than what it is to just be bipolar or to just be depressed. It turns into shame and self hate. And friends, that is so painful, and it is so dangerous to just life. Hating yourself and feeling ashamed of what is true for you in your experience with your mental health. Like, if you hate all of those things and you hide them and you feel ashamed of them, it's hard to like just go on flipping living. And I don't say that lightly, which is why honesty is the strategy that can give us that lifeline. So I share always, 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 ever since my hospital stay, one of the first shifts that I made, and something that I will continue until the day that I die when I am a old, happy woman, is that I share right away with my husband, always, with my close friends, like with the people that I spend time with my whole family. I have a family of 4 boys, and they are older. My youngest is 14 and my oldest is 21 and a half. So these are conversations they can have with me. And so I share with them, oh, here's what I'm going through. Remember when I told you guys that sometimes I have like mood swings? Well, hey, here's what it looks like when I start to feel manic. Um, it's just not worth trying to keep hidden away. And not only that, it doesn't do any favors in my relationships when people don't understand why I'm acting like so extra. And it doesn't do any favors in the world at large if we're not talking honestly about what we're going through. Plus, if things get worse, I'm going to need support, and I need people in my corner earlier than the extreme phase. We need people that have our back when things are just a little bit hard, so that when things are extremely hard, we're just never alone. And so sharing is it. The other thing that I do personally, and I do not know that this is for everyone, but because of who I am, because of the work I've done in my life, and because of the way that I operate and what kind of feeds my soul, I like to be transparent in public spaces too, which is why I'm recording this episode, which is why you'll see me show up in my social media on Instagram and tell you I'm feeling a little bit depressed, which is why I will create an art journal page about the darkness and I will tell you about it. Because when I am starting to escalate either direction, it helps me to publicly say those words to like build my allyship real big and to reinforce for myself that this is not a secret that I have to keep. When I share publicly the memo that the little Shawna that was locked away for so long because she was ashamed of the ways she was different, if I share publicly, little Shawna gets to actually experience me offering true full acceptance. She gets to be in the light, and I that's one of the main reasons why I will always choose to share as publicly as it is safe for me to do. And that is not for everyone, and sometimes in those tender spaces it's extra hard. I have the privilege of having a very supportive family and a very supportive community. The people in my public communities, in my social media, here on this podcast, the people that I have experienced have been very good to me, very supportive. And so I like to have them on Team Shawna when Team Shawna needs a little bit of extra patience or a little bit of extra love or a little bit of extra support. Um, so that's what I do. I share. I also think it's kind of my responsibility as someone who has recovered um to the level of feeling stable for them from, most of my days. As somebody that sees my mental health as kind of being in remission most of the time, I also see it as a responsibility to share because I do believe shame grows in the dark. And for those of you that experience your own mental health struggles, I want you to see me saying, hey, it's okay to feel this way. It's hard, but you're not alone. It's scary, but you are not alone. And so my transparency in public spaces makes me feel better because I feel like I am using this crazy intensity, this moment of feeling like a little ragged. I'm using that hard thing for something good, which was one of the things I mentioned just a few minutes ago. And I believe in that. That for me is medicine. Um, but when you're early in your journey and when you're tender, you need to protect yourself and you need to treat yourself with caution. And so, transparency in public spaces isn't always healthy if it's not something that is actually going to soothe and care for you. And so, you choose how public you want to be because it's up to you. And I choose how public I want to be because it's up to me. And there are certainly things in my mental health story, in my story of childhood trauma, that I don't talk about a lot in public spaces because I want to protect the parts of me that need protected. But this part of me wants to serve and wants to bring light to dark spaces and wants to just be honest so that honesty feels safe for the rest of those of you that struggle too. The other part about honesty for me is that I get to honestly look at my own journey. And this is a coping strategy that works for me in a lot of areas of my life, but I bring it to my mental health ups and downs as well. If I honestly look at my own journey, which is, kind of what I'm doing in this podcast a little bit, I can see the story. Oh, this is going to make me cry again because it means a lot to me. My story of struggle, my story of intense depression that I almost couldn't survive. And then my story of getting well, my story of fighting like hell, pardon my French, my story of recovery is a story that makes me feel like a warrior. It's a story that reminds me how strong I am, how capable I am, that I have overcome much harder highs and lows in my life, and that there is a future to my story that will include the chapter of this particular struggle. And it brings me hope and it brings me courage and it reminds me what my strengths are. And I'm so grateful for that. And so the story of my struggles and my overcoming is part of how I recover. And we all have stories of overcoming. Don't neglect the opportunity to use that to build yourself up because we beat ourselves up enough. I know that every day is brand new. And that means that this moment in time is one moment. This anxious feeling is one fraction of a moment. And today is today. And I will pace my way through it and get to the next one. And knowing that tomorrow is different than today allows me to remember that this episode doesn't have to look like the last episode. And that's especially helpful early on when you only know how scary it can be. Just because I'm telling myself this right now, just because I'm amping up and I can feel that manic, urgent, anxious energy like radiating out of me like some sort of monster, just because I can feel all of that. And I know that in the past that has led to some pretty ginormous crashes. It doesn't mean that this one is going to lead to a ginormous crash because today I am chapters later in my story. What I know about myself is so much greater than what I knew about myself a dozen years ago. And what I'm capable of increases with every single struggle that I face. not only that, but because I know my story, because I pay attention, because I really make it a practice to collect information and learn with every high and every low and every day in between. I also know a little secret, and it's this. Every time I have an extreme high or an extreme low, and I feel my mental health really start to suffer, every time I wait it out and I sit with what's happening and I make it through, all the while keeping a firm connection to my heart. Every single time I walk away from that experience with a gift, like an actual gift of knowing something I didn't know before. A lot of times it feels like a breakthrough. Like there is always a new layer of understanding waiting on the other side of this moment. And I want that gift. And it makes it easier. It makes it easier to feel totally crazy for reals, because I know that if I hang in there, I'm going to find something out that's going to serve me, and I can't wait. So I'm going to wait it out. I'm going to make it through. Friends, thank you for listening through with me. Let's finish off with a permission slip. Today, I am writing us a joint permission slip of sorts because, friends, I'm going to need this too. And I do need this, and I do tell myself this again and again. So I want to tell it to you. You, my friend, are allowed to, and I'm telling myself this here too, I am allowed to be right where I am emotionally right now. Dear friend, you are allowed to be right where you are emotionally, to feel all your feelings right now. And I'm telling myself that too. I am allowed to be right where I'm at emotionally right now. I really do want to encourage you to write this down for yourself. You are allowed to feel it. And friends, bonus points if you write it down and share a photo and tag me using the hashtag Fearless with Shawna Clingerman. My Instagram handle is at Shawna Clingerman. I would love to see you giving yourself permission to feel whatever you're feeling. And maybe the fact that what I'm feeling is like a little bit embarrassing, maybe that will help you to feel like you're allowed to feel whatever you're feeling too. Friends, thank you. Thank you for joining me for this kind of strange but special episode of Fearless with Shawna Clingerman. I would love to hear from you. Really would. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Can you relate? Is this helpful to you? Do you have questions? Please feel free to reach out. When people reach out to me about their own mental health because of something I said, it really does feed me. So please feel free to share. You can leave a comment on my posts on YouTube, on my Instagram or Facebook. You can send me a DM on Instagram if it feels too personal for you. I really do want to hear how this resonates for you. As a reminder, friends, you can find me on Instagram at Shawna Clingerman and on Facebook at Shawna Clingerman Designs. Or if you head over to my website, www.shawnaclingerman.com, you can find out all of the things, including a little bit more about my mental health story. It is very raw and very honest. So let me tell you that first. But I do have a link that I will include below where all of the posts that I shared about my own mental health story, specifically my severe depression, how that was, exactly how it felt, and hopefully it is an opportunity to bring hope to you or somebody that you love who is struggling. As a content creator, I hope you know what a difference it makes to us, to those of us that are putting this content out into the world, when you rate, review, share, comment, subscribe. When you take the time to share something that I have created with your own circle of friends and family and followers, it makes a real impact on my business, on my work, and it touches my heart and helps me to reach people that might need to hear exactly this. Don't forget, hit that subscribe button too. You don't want to miss a single fearless thing. Now, friends, remember, give yourself permission right here and now to show up fearlessly in your life, because no matter what you are going through, you, my friend, are already enough. Mental health, messiness, hurting heart, and all, you are good. And before I go, don't you forget, let's choose love, friends. Friends, as this episode and the full second part of this episode is wrapping up, I wanted to pop back in, present day Shawna, as I shared when I was introing our first episode in this two-part series. These episodes were recorded a little over a week ago. And as I share this, I just wanted to give you that information because the journey of mental health and of bipolar highs and lows is definitely one that shifts with time. And so, why not, as I'm creating a little intro here for you for this split, why not end on a note of just sharing where I'm at today? Um, which, friends, I believe I'm like about 16 days into this particular stretch of having a somewhat manic episode. And when I was recording this episode, I had no idea that it was going to last so long. I had no idea that it was going to get much, much worse before it got better. And quite frankly, I'm still not there that I know that I'm kind of headed out of this intense space. That being said, the things that I shared, the coping strategies that I gave you, those have been my friends, with the addition of some more intense strategies as things got harder, things like taking ice cold showers to shock my system back into some normalcy, um, things like leaving a lot of my work on the sidelines so that I can just focus on the things that will care for me. Things like also taking medicine to help me sleep and giving myself full permission to just not not be amazing. All of those have been things I have continued doing throughout this process. And today I will say tentatively that I feel a little bit of soothing, a little bit of lowering of my energy. And I'm hopeful that that means that there's a little bit of normal around the bend. That being said, there's no promises and no guarantees. Instead, there is just self care, self trust, and doing everything I can to be somebody that loves myself well, even when I'm not at my best. And I think that is the lesson I walk through this experience with. And it's the lesson I will continue to be learning again and again and again. Thank you for your patience and for um, just going on this little journey with me. It's been an intense, and I will continue over on my social media to share with you honestly how it is going, where I am at, and I trust fully that it will indeed get better because it always does. And I'm grateful for the knowledge that I carry around with me in my heart of just what I'm capable of. Thank you again, friends. Come let me know what you think. If anything has been helpful to you, I would love, love, love to know that. If you share my experiences, I would love to know that too. And until our next episode, thank you for being here. Let's keep choosing love, my friends.